My name is Madison Kerr. I am 26 years old, born in North Carolina, living outside Atlanta, and 8 months pregnant with a baby my parents keep referring to as their second chance. I used to think the hardest part of becoming a mother would be the fear that something could go wrong inside my own body. I did not expect the hardest part would be discovering that the two people who raised me had been running a quiet campaign against me for years, smiling for photos while drafting plans to take my child before she took her first breath. It started with a message request at 2:13 a.m. on a Thursday. The account looked harmless, the kind of local parenting page that posts stroller comparisons and pastel affirmations and church-friendly resources. The profile photo was a stock image of a bright kitchen and a woman laughing at a salad. The bio used warm words like community, safety, and support. Nothing about it looked like my mother. The only reason I recognized her was the rhythm of the writing. My mother stacks commas in a way that makes everything sound like a sermon. My father uses bullet points like he is writing a memo. This message had both. I did not accept the request. I took screenshots. I opened the message anyway. The language was soft on the surface and sharp underneath. It claimed concern for an unborn child. It claimed that a pregnant woman in my neighborhood had become isolated and unstable. It included my full name, my due date, and the name of the hospital I had chosen. It referenced my prenatal clinic and the street I lived on. Then it listed 3 allegations: that I was abusing prescription medication, that my partner was controlling me, and that I had a history of emotional episodes that put children at risk. The message ended with an offer that felt like a threat. Resources were available, family help was available, and authorities would be involved if necessary. My hands went cold, not from fear of the claims themselves, but from the reality that someone knew details I had kept off social media. My daughter kicked hard, a sudden thud under my ribs, as if she sensed the shift in my breathing. I sat on the edge of our couch and forced my inhale to stay steady. My partner, Jonah, walked in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of peppermint tea. He took one look at my face and set the mugs down without a word. Jonah is 29, a high school art teacher with paint under his nails and a calmness that functions like discipline. We have been together 3 years. We moved in together last spring, long before I got pregnant, long before my parents began calling our home temporary. Jonah is not perfect. Neither am I. But our relationship is built on routine, on showing up, on small promises kept. The kind of foundation my parents always described as childish until it stopped being under their control. I handed Jonah my phone. He read the message, then opened the profile and scanned the posts. He did not look shocked. He looked like a teacher who had just identified the pattern in a student's behavior and knew the next step had to be boring and formal. One question. He wanted to know how a random local page had my hospital. I did what I always do when my mind wants to spin. I followed evidence. I opened the account's follower list, a few local businesses, a few parenting influencers, 2 church pages. Then I saw the 2 names that made my stomach drop. My mother's public account and my father's account were both following it, liking posts, leaving supportive comments that use the same voice as the message. It was not a stranger. It was a stage my parents had been building. That night, I opened an old folder on my laptop. I named it years ago with a dull word because dull words attract less attention: archive. At first, it held rent receipts and insurance forms. Then it became a place for screenshots of my mother reframing conversations and my father rewriting agreements. Little revisions meant to make me doubt my own memory. I had told myself the folder was just caution. Now it felt like a lifeline. My parents, Carol and Dan Kerr, are admired in public. My mother runs a small nonprofit that hosts food drives and back-to-school events. My father works in operations for a hospital network and volunteers as a youth baseball coach. They have a wall of framed photos with smiling kids in uniforms and group shots from charity banquets. Their social media feeds are curated galleries of generosity. They speak in public like people who want to be quoted. They call themselves servant leaders. They call their control structure family values. Inside our home when I was growing up, love was conditional, and conditional love was treated like education. Obedience was gratitude. Privacy was deception. Independence was rebellion. If I got an A, my mother praised me and reminded me I owed them for the opportunity. If I got a B, what was wrong with my focus? If I cried, it was drama. If I defended myself, it was disrespect. My father rarely raised his voice. He used the calmer weapon. He labeled my reactions as the problem and presented his silence as maturity. People in our community loved them. They did not see my mother's soft insults, the ones that sounded like concern. They did not see my father's careful punishments, the ones that sounded like structure. To outsiders, my parents were generous, stable, and wise. To me, they were a door that closed any time I tried to walk through it on my own. The first time I understood the gap between their public image and their private reality was at my cousin's graduation party 2 years ago. An aunt complimented me on my job at a dental clinic and mentioned I seemed happier since moving out. My mother smiled like sunshine and described my past major changes in college as proof I could not commit. A story about me forgetting to pick up my younger brother from practice when I was 16, leaving out the part where my father had changed the schedule and never told me. Everyone laughed politely. My father squeezed my shoulder afterward and told me not to make it a big deal. The message was clear. Their version would be the one people remembered. When Jonah and I announced my pregnancy, my parents performed joy. My mother posted a photo of my ultrasound before I had told my closest friends. The caption included words like miracle and legacy. My father commented with a verse about children being a heritage. Then the questions began. They were never questions about my health or my comfort. They were questions about access. Where would I give birth? Who would be in the room? What would the baby be named? The name question returned again and again, like a lever they kept testing. The first time it sounded like excitement. The second time it sounded like a survey. The third time it sounded like a demand. My mother began calling my baby little Caroline, using her own middle name, and laughed when I did not laugh. My father took a different approach. He talked about tradition and how family names build identity. He used the tone he uses at work when he wants agreement without debate. I tightened boundaries. Visits by invitation only. No surprise drop-ins. No posting baby information online. No discussion of the name. My mother responded with a day of wounded silence, then switched to sweetness, so smooth it felt rehearsed. She sent baby clothes with handwritten notes about forgiveness. My father sent a message about being proud of my maturity. They both behaved like people who accepted my boundaries. That should have been the warning. My parents do not accept boundaries. They strategize around them. After the Safe Start message request, I called my prenatal clinic and asked for a confidentiality alert on my file. The office manager offered a password system and visitor restrictions. The manager sounded tired in a way that suggested she had seen family harassment before. I thanked her and felt the first small relief of the week. Then I remembered something my mother used to say. In our family, people who protect themselves must be hiding something. Jonah and I met with a family law attorney the next afternoon. The attorney spoke in plain language: a will, a guardianship preference document, medical proxies, a hospital visitor list, a plan for handling false reports. She explained that when people weaponize systems, the response must also be system-based: documentation, protocols, witnesses, and clear boundaries. That evening, Jonah returned from a grocery run and found a small package on our doorstep. No return address. Inside was a baby name book. Sticky notes marked page after page: Caroline, Grace, Faith, Mercy, Legacy. The inside cover held a note in my father's neat handwriting. It did not sound like love. It sounded like governance. It described the embarrassment it would cause them if I chose something foreign or trendy. It described how people would judge our family. It ended with a line that stuck like a splinter. Mistakes do not get to name the future. I read that line 3 times. My parents had always treated my independence as a mistake. Now they were extending that verdict to my daughter. My anger did not explode. It focused. I opened archive and searched for a phrase that had been used on me since childhood. For your own good. The search pulled up an email from 6 years earlier to my college advisor. I had forgotten it existed. The email described me as impulsive and unstable and asked the advisor to keep an eye on me. At the time, I thought it was overprotective. Now I saw it as a prototype. My mother had been practicing this language for years. She had been planting doubt in places that mattered. On Sunday, my parents hosted their nonprofit fundraising brunch, a public event with sponsors, church leaders, and a photographer who posted albums online. My parents invited Jonah and me weeks earlier. I had declined politely. After the Safe Start threat and the baby name book, I understood why they wanted us there. They wanted an audience. They wanted to announce my baby's name publicly, so I would feel trapped by social pressure. If I protested, I would look unstable. If I stayed silent, they would claim consent. We arrived. The room smelled like cinnamon pastries and perfume. My mother floated through the crowd like a professional hostess. My father shook hands like a candidate. People hugged me and patted my belly and told me my parents must be thrilled. Jonah stood close. A photographer snapped candid shots. My mother positioned people in the background the way she always does, arranging the scene so it looks like unity. My father stepped onto a small stage and thanked donors, a story about community and service. He spoke about blessings. Then he moved to the crowd's favorite topic, the baby. He talked about becoming grandparents. He talked about legacy. He talked about names. And then, without looking at me, he announced the name they had chosen, Caroline Grace Kerr. He delivered it as fact, not suggestion. A few people clapped immediately, relieved to have something celebratory to clap for. My body reacted before my mind did. Heart racing, throat tight, palms damp. I felt the familiar pressure to perform gratitude. Then I felt my daughter kick hard again, as if she was reminding me whose life this really was. I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just a controlled movement that pulled attention from the stage to me. I smiled at the crowd and thanked them for their support. Then we were keeping baby updates private for safety reasons due to recent harassment. Harassment is a word that changes the air in a room. It sounds adult. It sounds real. I did not name my parents. I did not need to. I followed with one more sentence. The baby's name would be announced by her parents, and only by her parents, when we were ready. Then I sat down and placed my hand on Jonah's arm as if we were simply being careful. My father's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. My mother moved toward the microphone and began a speech about compromise and honoring family. She described my boundaries as stress. She described their pressure as love. She tried to recruit the room into persuading me. The crowd responded the way crowds do when confronted with discomfort. They looked away. They checked their phones. They pretended not to notice. My mother hates nothing more than an audience that refuses to play. We left early, using my pregnancy as an excuse. In the car, Jonah kept one hand on the steering wheel and one on my knee. He focused on the baby's movement and my breathing. That grounded me. When we got home, my phone had multiple missed calls. A voicemail arrived from my mother within minutes. The voice sounded wounded and gentle. The message framed the brunch as a misunderstanding. It claimed my father had simply gotten excited. It claimed my reaction proved I was overwhelmed. It ended by offering help, as if the only way to calm me was to hand my life back to them. I forwarded the voicemail to our attorney. The attorney responded quickly with a recommendation. Stop expecting apologies and start expecting escalation. Then a new sign appeared that the escalation had already begun. On Tuesday, my friend Tessa visited. Tessa is a nurse, the kind of friend who brings soup and also brings blunt truth. She sat at our kitchen table and explained how hospital visitor restrictions work, how social workers evaluate anonymous tips, how false reports can still create temporary chaos. She recommended passwords, documentation, and a clear plan for who could make medical decisions if I became incapacitated during labor. Listening to her, I felt something shift from fear to preparation. That afternoon, a neighbor knocked with an awkward smile and a printed page. Someone had been going door to door in our complex leaving flyers. The flyer looked like a community safety bulletin. It used a stock photo of a pregnant woman and bold text about supporting mothers in crisis. It listed a phone number and an email connected to Safe Start Atlanta. It described signs that a pregnant woman might be in danger. It encouraged neighbors to report concerns. The neighbor apologized for intruding and asked whether everything was okay. The neighbor looked genuinely worried. My parents had managed to turn their story into a community issue. Jonah took the flyer to our building security contact and also sent it to our attorney. The attorney's response was immediate. This was not only harassment, this was defamation and an attempt to recruit third parties into monitoring me. She recommended a cease and desist letter and the involvement of law enforcement if the campaign continued. Our attorney also recommended a private investigator. The investigator's name was Lila Grant, a former fraud analyst who spoke like a person used to pulling threads. She reviewed the Safe Start account, traced the email domain, checked the flyer's print watermark, and followed the trail back to a print shop. Within 48 hours, she returned with a chain that made my throat go dry. The print order had been placed from a home Wi-Fi network registered to my parents' address. The order used a generic email, but the IP logged in the shop system pointed to them. The tone and wording matched drafts stored in a shared document folder tied to the Safe Start account. The most unsettling find was a document titled Outreach Plan. Lila gained access because a link had been left public for a few minutes during an edit. The plan was not emotional, it was methodical. It listed my name, Jonah's name, my clinic, my hospital, my due date, our building security contact, Jonah's school, and 3 neighbors labeled by personality. It included scripts for contacting my employer, scripts for contacting church leaders, and suggested language for filing a report with county services. The plan also included a section titled Name and Access. Under it were 2 objectives: secure the family name for the child and establish consistent, unsupervised grandparent contact to strengthen future legal standing. I sat at the kitchen table and read the plan until the letters blurred. My whole life, I had been told my parents were simply strict, simply protective, simply traditional. The plan proved something else. They were organized. They were willing to weaponize systems. They were willing to build a record against me so they could claim they were rescuing a child from an unstable mother. The cruelty hurt, but the coordination hurt more. Then a twist arrived from the one person I did not expect to help. My younger brother Caleb sent Jonah a single text. Sorry. Caleb is 22, still living near my parents while finishing trade school. He has always survived storms by staying small. Jonah responded carefully and offered a meeting at a neutral coffee shop. Caleb arrived with his hoodie up and a face that looked exhausted. Caleb had opened our father's laptop by accident while trying to print something. The laptop unlocked to a folder labeled Community Outreach. Inside were drafts of emails to my employer, drafts to my clinic, and a spreadsheet tracking responses. There were notes on which church members might be sympathetic. There were reminders about which nonprofit board members could be influenced. Caleb took photos of the screen, panicked, then took more. He brought the photos to us like someone delivering contraband. Caleb also revealed something that completed the picture. My parents had been discussing grandparent rights in private. They had rehearsed what they would tell a judge. They had rehearsed what they would tell a social worker. They had rehearsed what they would tell our neighbors. Caleb described my mother practicing a trembling voice in the kitchen, repeating lines about a daughter who had spiraled, a granddaughter who needed stability, and grandparents who only wanted peace. Caleb described my father drafting timelines, highlighting normal pregnancy mood swings as evidence of instability. It was a double act. My mother provided emotion. My father provided structure. That was the moment my fear became clarity. I did not need my parents to change. I needed to outmaneuver them. Jonah and I met with the hospital's patient advocate and the labor and delivery supervisor. We brought the outreach plan, the screenshots, and Lila's findings. We requested a password system, a restricted visitor list, and a security alert. We created written documentation that only Jonah could make decisions if I became incapacitated. We provided photos of my parents and a note that they were not allowed access under any circumstances. Our attorney prepared a formal cease and desist letter. It demanded immediate cessation of contact with my clinic, hospital, workplace, neighbors, and any third parties connected to us. It demanded removal of materials using my name. It warned that future contact would be treated as harassment and defamation. It also addressed the custody angle directly. Our child would remain in my care and Jonah's care, and any attempt to interfere would be met with legal action. My parents responded with escalation and innocence, their favorite combination. My mother posted a long public note about praying for a daughter led astray. She avoided my name, but included enough details to identify me. She framed Jonah as controlling and framed my boundaries as proof I was isolated. My father liked the post and commented with a verse about honoring parents. Their public faces looked sad and noble. Their private plan continued. 2 days later, a county social worker called. The voice sounded careful and polite, the voice of a professional trying not to frighten a pregnant woman. There had been a prenatal safety concern report. The report claimed I was misusing medication and that my partner was unstable. The report asked the county to consider a post-birth safety plan. I did not panic. I requested the case number. For the allegations in writing, I stated that we were represented by counsel. I offered documentation of harassment and impersonation. The social worker paused longer than expected, then confirmed the report had been filed anonymously and included language that resembled a template. I shared the outreach plan and explained that a harassment campaign was in progress. The social worker agreed to note the context. She also explained a reality that made my stomach tighten. Even false reports can trigger follow-ups. The system is designed to err on the side of child safety. My parents were relying on that design. The next week felt like living inside a glass house while stones hit the windows. Church members reached out to Jonah's school. A volunteer from my mother's nonprofit contacted my clinic with a question disguised as a donation opportunity. Someone tried to join our building's neighborhood app group and posted a vague note about supporting a mother in crisis. The same phrases repeated: just concerned, just checking, just wanting safety. The language was my mother's. The organization was my father's. 2 days before my due date, my parents escalated again. Safe Start created a public event page for a prayer circle in a park near our home. This time, the page used my full name and our general neighborhood. It invited neighbors to support a vulnerable unborn child. It asked attendees to encourage the mother to accept family help. It described the baby as the Kerr family's legacy. It was no longer a whisper. It was a megaphone. We chose a different stage for the confrontation. Not the park, not a comment war online. We chose the one place my parents valued more than anything: their public image. That weekend, my mother's nonprofit held its annual gala at a hotel ballroom. Sponsors attended. Church leaders attended. A photographer from a local lifestyle magazine attended. My parents loved the gala because it made them look like the center of the community. They loved it because it made them feel untouchable. Jonah and I attended with Caleb. Caleb's hands shook as we walked in. The room glowed with warm lighting and polite laughter. My mother wore a navy gown and hugged donors. My father wore a suit and moved through sponsors with the confidence of a man who believes structure equals morality. When my mother saw me, her face brightened theatrically, and she moved forward with open arms, ready for the performance of reconciliation. I stepped back gently. Jonah remained beside me. Caleb stayed close, a witness who could no longer pretend. During the program, my father took the stage and announced a new initiative about protecting children. He spoke about community accountability. He used exactly the same language as the flyers, repackaged as a nonprofit mission. Then my mother joined him and spoke about family values. At the end, she invited the crowd to celebrate her upcoming grandchild and announced the family name again, presenting it as settled. Caleb moved first. He approached the event coordinator and handed over a sealed envelope and a flash drive. The coordinator's face tightened. She signaled security and paused the program, announcing a brief technical interruption. In a room like that, a pause is louder than a confrontation. The coordinator spoke quietly to the nonprofit board chair. The board chair walked onto the stage and requested my parents step off stage immediately. My parents hesitated, confused by a consequence they had not scripted. My mother tried to keep smiling. My father's face remained controlled. They stepped down. The board chair returned to the microphone and announced that the nonprofit would be pausing the program to address an internal compliance matter and thank donors for their patience. Donors do not like ambiguity. Sponsors do not like risk. My parents could feel their audience shifting. In a hallway outside the ballroom, the mask slipped. My mother moved toward me with eyes wet and sharp. My father approached with calm and cold precision. My mother accused me of humiliation. My father labeled my actions unstable. My mother framed herself as heartbroken. My father framed the situation as a safety issue. Their voices were different, but the objective was the same: force me into emotional reaction so they could point at it as proof. I did not debate. I repeated one sentence with a calm that surprised even me. There would be no contact with my hospital, my clinic, my workplace, my neighbors, or my child. The sentence did not require their agreement. It required compliance. Jonah's presence blocked the emotional hooks. Caleb's presence blocked their claim that I was isolated. The documents in the envelope blocked their legal maneuvering. The board chair informed them that, pending investigation, they were removed from leadership and prohibited from representing the nonprofit publicly. My mother's eyes widen the way they do when she realizes charm will not work. My father's jaw tightened the way it does when he realizes structure is now aimed at him. Neither of them apologized. They pivoted to blame. They threatened reputational damage. The board chair stayed firm. A sponsor walked past and avoided eye contact. My parents felt something they rarely feel: vulnerability. 2 nights later, labor began. The timing felt almost merciful, as if my body waited until the immediate threat had been contained before opening. Jonah drove to the hospital while I focused on breathing. The hospital already had the password system and restricted visitor list. In intake, a nurse asked if there were any special concerns. I handed her one more printed page, a photo of the Safe Start account, and the names connected to it. My parents tried anyway. They arrived at the hospital lobby with my father's operations manager confidence and my mother's nonprofit matriarch charm. The front desk, they were immediate family, and there was an emergency. Security checked the alert. Security asked for the password. My parents did not have it. My mother tried tears. My father tried credentials. Security remained calm and firm and escorted them out. A nurse later informed me with quiet relief: my daughter was born just before sunrise. She arrived with a fierce little cry and a face that looked serious, as if she had already decided she would not tolerate nonsense. Jonah cut the cord with hands that shook from awe. The nurse asked for the baby's name for the bracelet. I spoke it clearly: Eliana Rose Kerr Watson. Jonah's last name added without hesitation. The name felt like a door closing and a life beginning. We stayed in the hospital 2 days. My parents attempted contact through a pastor and through an aunt. Every attempt hit a closed door. The county social worker closed the report with a note that the concerns appeared unfounded and retaliatory. Our attorney filed documentation of impersonation and defamation. The nonprofit board opened an internal review, and sponsors quietly withdrew support. My parents' public image began to crack, not with drama, but with the absence of applause. When we returned home, our porch was empty. No surprise gifts, no uninvited visits. For the first time in months, our home felt like ours. Caleb visited that weekend with groceries and a nervous smile. He held Eliana carefully, as if he was afraid to break something sacred. He apologized again, not for curiosity, but for silence. I forgave him, not because forgiveness erases harm, but because he chose the right side when it mattered. He also brought one more piece of proof, a printed copy of a calendar from my father's laptop, showing scheduled outreach calls mapped to my due date. A month passed. My parents attempted a new narrative online. They framed themselves as victims of a smear campaign. They claimed they were removed from the nonprofit unfairly. They implied Jonah had isolated me and that I had turned against my family. People who only knew their public faces offered sympathy. People who had seen the board notice and the leaked outreach plan offered silence. Silence is what happens when an audience no longer knows what to clap for. The final twist arrived in a plain envelope addressed to me in my father's handwriting. Inside was a single typed page, no signature. It offered a deal. It promised to stop all outreach reports and messaging if I agreed to two conditions. Give the baby the family name Caroline as a first name, and allow weekly unsupervised visits. The page framed the conditions as peace. It framed my refusal as cruelty. It framed their control as love. Reading it, I felt something settle inside me. This was not confusion. This was not misunderstanding. This was not overprotective parenting. This was an attempted takeover. It was a baby name war used as a gateway to access. It was a double life reveal on paper, proof that their public kindness and private coercion were two sides of the same plan. Our attorney filed for a protective order. The hearing was not dramatic. It was paperwork and timelines and exhibits, screenshots of Safe Start, copies of flyers, the outreach plan, the voicemail, the anonymous report record, the typed deal letter, Caleb's photos of the laptop folder. The judge granted a temporary order and then a longer order after review. My parents were prohibited from contacting me, Jonah, or any third party connected to us, including medical providers, employers, neighbors, and school staff. They were prohibited from approaching our home and from attending any daycare or pediatric appointments. They were warned that further harassment would escalate consequences. Life after the order did not become perfect. It became quieter. Quiet is a kind of recovery. Jonah returned to teaching. I took maternity leave and learned the strange, tender chaos of newborn days. Tessa visited often. Caleb visited sometimes. At night, I rocked Eliana and watched her eyes focus on the world like she was taking inventory. I thought about my parents and their public smiles and private plans. I thought about how close they came to turning my pregnancy into a court file. I also thought about the difference between love and control, and how many people confuse them because control can look like attention. The moral is simple and hard. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who look safest in public. Control can wear a volunteer badge. Harassment can wear a prayer request. A smear campaign can wear the word concern. When both parents work together, one supplying emotion and one supplying structure, the trap feels impossible to escape because it looks like family. The way out is not a better argument. The way out is boring truth. Documentation, passwords, witnesses, and boundaries that are enforced even when it breaks the story everyone else prefers. Your child does not need grandparents who demand ownership. Your child needs parents who can protect peace. And if protecting peace means walking away from the people who taught you to doubt yourself, then walking away becomes an act of motherhood too.